Hi there and welcome once again. This is Jennifer McGuire and I hope you're having a good week. So today I am sharing with you a technique that I have wanted to try out on a card for a long time now. I've had it in my list of ideas to try. I'm so excited to finally do this, and that is to do string art on your cards. Now, string art is very popular in crafting, but honestly, I've never tried it, but I thought I would here on paper. Now, I have several different examples for you today of different ways to achieve this look. Some require certain tools, some don't require certain tools, so be sure to stay tuned for the whole video for different options. Now, I know some of you may not be interested in this technique, however, I still encourage you to watch because I have some inking tips and some other techniques that I'll be sharing also. Okay, let's start with this example. I'm going to do the stamping first and then we'll do the string art. This new stamp set from Altenew will be on my favorites list from this year. This is the Altenew Dot Botanicals. You have the solid leaf and then you have the same shape leaf but in dots. Now you could use these together, layered or separately, and it's perfect for backgrounds, but today I'm going to use it as a focal point image. Here are some ideas using the stamp set on a card. This is from part of the insert that comes with Altenew stamps that has lots of ideas for stamp layering. Okay, so let's go ahead and do stamping. I wanted to show you how I multi-ink this stamp. I'm using my MISTI stamping tool because it's super helpful, but you could use an acrylic block or stamp positioner if you prefer. After rubbing the new stamp with a dry cloth, we can go ahead and ink it up. I am using Altenew inks today, and I'll link to all of the specific color families that I use in my description below. So I started by stamping the lightest ink, so that was a color called Sunray. And now I'm coming in with a slightly darker ink, this is Snapdragon, and I'm inking up just the middle of the stamp with that slightly darker ink and an ink blending tool. This puts just a little bit of the ink down and kind of a soft edge, and that way we can get kind of an ombre look with our stamping. So we have the light on the top, we have this medium color in the middle, and now I'm switching to Marigold, which is the darkest, and putting that towards the bottom of our stamp. Now you'll notice I'm stamping it a few times just to intensify the color. Using an inking tool to ink up the stamp helps to get a beautiful blended look when you stamp. Now while I have the stamp out, I'm going to go ahead and do the same for a blue leaf and a green leaf. I ended up not using the blue leaf in this video, but I'll definitely save it for a future card. I really like how doing this technique allows you to get an ombre stamp image, and it adds a lot of interest to this large stamp. Now I could leave this as is, but I decided to go ahead and do the second layer, which is the same shape but has lots of dots on it. Such a cool look. This time I'm stamping with VersaMark Ink, and then on the orange leaf here, I'm going to add gold embossing powder and heat set it. I really like the look of those gold dots against the warm inks below. Now for the blue leaf, I thought I'd change it up a bit. This time I stamped with VersaMark Ink and added white embossing powder. So these white dots will stand out more against the blue leaves, but I like the different look that it gives. And then finally for our green leaf, this one I'm stamping with VersaMark Ink also, but this time I'm using Hero Art's Satin Pearl Embossing Powder, which is a favorite of mine because it just picks up whatever color is behind it and gives it metallic shine, kind of a pearly look. And there you can see the beautiful results on that one. After I was done with my embossing, I used the coordinating die to cut all the leaves out. And let's start with our first card here using the yellow leaf. Now I'm using the Altenew String Art Rectangle die set for many of today's cards. This allows you to do the string art look very easily. However, if you don't have this set, I will show you a way to do the string art look without it, so stay tuned for that. But for now, let's go ahead and use one of these rectangles. Now these rectangles create little pierced dots on your paper. It doesn't actually cut, it just creates pierced dots that allow you to easily do the string art. In fact, you could put all of these rectangles together on a card and it would create a dotted grid background. For my particular example, I wanted the string art to be raised, so I cut a rectangle inside of the dotted edge. So this is a Hero Arts Rectangle Infinity die, and this will cut a rectangle right in the center of my white cardstock. I just recommend using heavyweight cardstock for this. Then I'm going to take the string art rectangle that creates dots that are slightly bigger than our cut rectangle window. So now we have the little dots right outside of the window. You could skip the window if you wanted and just have a rectangle of dots. Okay, so now for the string. You could use any string you may have, or thread or floss. I am using 2-ply of DMC floss. This is what you use for cross stitching. I have lots of this because I like to stitch on my cards, and also Lila likes to make friendship bracelets. So use whatever you have on hand. If you don't have anything, I will link below to a Concord and Ninth kind of sewing bundle, like a starter kit. It has some needles and some DMC floss, so you can try things like this on your card. Okay, so I also like to use the mat that comes inside of my MISTI when I do my stitching, because the backside is like a mouse pad and it gives me a place where I can pierce my needle. I'll be doing a diagonal pattern with my string art or my stitching here. It's really easy and doesn't take long. This card took me about 10 minutes to do the string art. So I'm going diagonal, so I start at one corner and go across. Then I move to the next hole and I go across again. Then I move to the next hole and go across. And I continue to do this to create a diagonal pattern across that rectangle opening. Now, there are many different patterns you could do here. You could get really creative. You could also just do kind of a tic-tac-toe pattern, which you'll see me do in my next example. But I'll be honest, I tried a bunch of different things, and this diagonal pattern was definitely my favorite. So I continue to go across, filling up that rectangle opening. You'll see lots of pieces of tape on the back. I just find that to be the easiest way to tape off when I'm at the end of my thread and need to start a new piece. There are many ways you can kind of hide that, but nobody's going to see this, so I feel like the tape is the easiest. So here I'm going to start doing the same thing but in the other direction. So I have diagonal lines going the other way, and we end up with a background that looks like a bunch of X's. You could weave here if you wanted to, but I found that this was the easiest and took very little time. Now, I chose to do one color for all of this string art, but you definitely could do like a rainbow pattern. You could even just use white thread or floss and change the color of it with your Copic markers or permanent markers. So the sky is the limit with this. Now, this is probably the most time-consuming pattern I did today. It took me a little more than 10 minutes, but I feel like it's definitely worth it. You could simplify it if you wanted to. Once I'm done, I'm putting foam tape around the outside frame here so that I can add it to my card and it'll be lifted off and have some dimension. I have a 4 1/4 by 5.5 inch note card that I made from Simon Says Stamp Fog cardstock. I put some white cardstock on that so that when you peek through this piece, you could see the white inside. And check that out. I just think that's a fun backdrop for this focal point image. Now, to add that leaf onto it, I'm putting 2 foam dots kind of behind the string so that this would have something to kind of rest on. And then I put liquid adhesive along the back, and I'll lay that right onto our string art. And it looks like it's floating on there. It's super cool. Now, I don't want to press this too far down because I don't want to glue down all the string art. I want it to be popped up. For the sentiment, I used the older Altenew Signature Words die set that you see there on the top. I die cut thanks 3 times from black cardstock and glued it together for a stacked look. I then also stamped a sentiment strip and put it right below it. So here you can see that fun string art look. It looks like our stamped image is kind of floating on it, and it's such a fun, unique backdrop. You can also see the gold detail that I did using that Dot Botanical stamp set. By the way, the For Your Friendship is from this older Altenew stamp set. This is one that I happen to reach for a lot because I like the sentiments in it. Also, it is a stitching stamp set too. You can either stamp for a stitch look, or you can use the dies that go with it and do the actual stitching, the cross-stitch pattern yourself. Now, I had so much fun doing that card that I decided to do another one similar using the same rectangle string art dies. We're going to change it up a little bit, and this time I'm using a stamp set from Altenew called the Rose Blossom Stamp Set. This is one of the best layering stamp sets that I've used before because layering up this flower is really easy to do. It really lines up very easily and it gives a very realistic look. Now here's part of the guide that comes with the stamp set, and you can see the beautiful examples that you can create. Now I'm going to skip the stamping with this and just show you the final results. But keep in mind, one of the good things about this stamp set is it has the outline image and the layering image, so you can either use them separate or together, which gives you more uses for a single stamp set. I often get asked for a recommendation for an easy starter layering set, and this is definitely a good option. Okay, now for the background on this, I die cut the rectangle window and the string art rectangle exactly like I did on the last example. However, this time, instead of putting our thread in a diagonal, I am instead going to just go across, and then I will go back and add the string going up and down. I think this would be really fun to do with metallic thread. You could also add beads to it if you wanted to, but I tried to keep it pretty simple today because I was going to have these bold colors on top. Okay, so I added my stamped and die cut flower and leaves. Those are from the Rose Blossom stamp set. And I also added a sentiment strip across and a few little pearls here and there. So you can use this string art technique as a backdrop for any stamps that you have. I think it'd be fun to make them float across a window, or you could do a smaller area if you wanted to save time when doing the string art. And by the way, that sentiment is from the Altenew Dearest Friends stamp set, which is another I reach for often for sentiments. Okay, let's move on to a different type of string art example. In this case, there's no window behind it, and I just did a border of large stitches. So it's a little variation of a string art. Let's start by doing our stamped images first. This is the new Altenew Grateful Heart stamp set, which is another excellent layering set. You can see how the shape of the flowers is very unique, so it's easy to line up each of the layers. And I'm going to show you more of that layering for this example. By the way, the inserts that come with these stamp sets are much bigger. I just tore off the piece that I needed to show the layering. Okay, so let's start with the outline. Again, this is a great thing about this stamp set, is it has the outline images, which you could use as is for your own coloring, or you can add the layering stamping like I'm going to do, or you could use the layering stamping alone without the outline. So you can get more from one stamp set. By the way, all the blue, green, and orange and yellow inks that I use in today's video are all the same on the cards, and they are linked below if you want to check out the specific colors. Okay, for the first solid layer, I'm starting with the lightest color of ink. One of the things I get asked about a lot is when you have a new stamp and you put ink on it, sometimes the ink wants to bubble on the stamp surface, which doesn't give a good stamped image. One way to prevent that is to rub the new stamp with a dry cloth before you ink it. That's something that you'll see me do all the time in videos, and it makes a big difference. Another tip that I recommend when doing stamp layering like this: after you've stamped a layer, heat set it. That way, when you stamp the next layer on top, it stays crisp and doesn't kind of bleed out into the wet ink below. So you'll see me often heat between each layer too. Okay, so off screen I added the yellow layering images for the center of the flower, and there we have a beautiful flower image with some fun leaves. It's another great layering set. Okay, so now let's do this stitching that you see in the background. It's basically a border of string art. Now I'm going to use the rectangle string art dies that I used before to create our 2 lines of dots to create the string art. If you don't have these dies, you could definitely draw a pencil line and then make little marks at every 1/4 inch and poke little dots there to do your string art. But I had this die, so I thought I would just use it creatively to quickly make all the little dots. You can see how I have the die hanging off the paper so that only one edge cuts little dots into our paper. So I repeated that. I did 2 lines that are about 1 inch apart, and now we can do our string art. I'm again using 2-ply of that gray floss, but use whatever string or thread or anything that you have. Okay, so let's start doing the string art. I'm just starting on one of the lines, going across to the hole across from it, and then I will return back with the next holes. And I just end up with these lines of string art creating a border. Now you can see how this would be very easy to create on your own without a die. So if you want to try string art, this would be a good option. Okay, so after I went ahead and did some lines of the string art, I decided that I wanted my lines closer together. So all I'm doing is going and poking a hole with my needle onto the back of a mouse pad. Just a hole in between each of the holes that were made by the die. So you can see me putting them right between. I'm not measuring it out. I'm just kind of eyeballing it, and I find that works good enough. So I'll do that on both sides, and this will allow me to add more of the string art in between so that our little lines are closer together. Now you could do like a cross pattern. You could do anything you want here. You could do rainbow. I just wanted a simple backdrop behind our fun stamped images. Okay, so I continued the string art until I covered across the entire piece of cardstock, and then I added it to a 4 1/4 by 5.5 inch Simon Says Stamp Fog note card. I stamped a sentiment right above our little string art border, and then I'm adding our flowers and leaves that we stamped and die cut with some foam dots so it stands up a little bit. Now I did cover quite a bit of this string art, so I probably should have used a smaller image, but I really like this one, so I decided to go with it. I also added a few yellow pearls here and there. So here you can see the fun string art backdrop. It adds some interest, but it isn't too distracting. And also the beautiful stamp layering image that you can get from that Grateful Heart stamp set. But think about it, you could use that string art backdrop along with any stamped images on top that you may have. And by the way, that perfect sentiment is from this Altenew Dearest Friends stamp set. It says, "You are the friend everyone wishes they had." Okay, now I thought I would share with you an idea for creating your own string art. In my first few examples, I showed how to use those rectangle string art dies. In this case, you don't need any special dies. And by the way, on this card, this string art window there is actually a window on the front of the card that allows you to see through to the inside, which is something you could do with the card designs that I did earlier. Okay, so for this one, I'm going to use a square die cut to die cut a window on the front of a 4 by 5 1/4 white cardstock piece. These are the Altenew Halftone square dies. So after I've die cut that, I'm also going to die cut a window on the front of a 4 1/4 by 5.5 inch note card. I want the square die cut window to be in the same spot, so I'm tracing it with my pencil, and then I'll line the die up on the front of the note card. Open up the note card and run it through my die cut machine. And now I have the square window cut on the front of my note card and that white panel in the exact same spot. Next, I have a piece of graph paper. Yes, this is graph paper from my engineering days, but I use graph paper a lot with card making. Because you have those perfectly spaced little lines, you can use it as a guide for stamping or for lining things up, and in this case, for doing your string art. So I die cut the same square from a center of a piece of graph paper. I'm going to freeze it here so you can see that graph paper in there. Now when I add my string, all I have to do is follow those lines. So I find graph paper to be handy in the craft room. I'll link to the one that I use below because it gives you those nice even marks and you can line things up with it. But another option, if you don't have graph paper, is to draw little tick marks with a ruler. Or here, check this out. See how my work surface has a grid? I could just follow those lines by lining up my square over the work surface. But since I had the graph paper, I thought I'd go ahead and pop that in there, and now we'll start doing our string art. This time we don't actually need a needle, I'm just going to use tape. So I'm putting strong double-sided tape from Lawn Fawn right around the edges of our window, so on all 4 sides. I then am going to stretch some string across it. This is actually floss from DMC that is pearl cotton. It doesn't have all the plies to it, it's a little bit thicker, but you could use whatever you have. You could use really narrow ribbon here, any string, whatever you got. And I'm just cutting small pieces and stretching them across, but I'm following the lines of that graph paper. So this will help me to make sure that my lines are evenly spaced and straight. I'm going to put down 1 vertically, then 1 horizontally, then 1 vertically, 1 horizontally, and that kind of weaves them together a bit. You could do a more elaborate weaving, but I thought this would be simple and fast. Now each time I stretch it across the tape, then I use my scissors to just press the string or the thread or the floss, whatever you want to call it, into the exposed adhesive so that it doesn't come undone. And I'll keep going until I have that entire window covered. So for string art, you have a few options. You could use the specific string art dies that I used earlier, or you can draw little pencil marks to poke your own holes to do string art, or you could just stretch across using adhesive, and then you don't need a needle at all, as I did here. Lots of different options. I hope you'll give them a try. Okay, once I had that done, it's time to stamp a sentiment onto our front panel. I'm using the Altenew Wild Ferns stamp set, which I've used in a video before. I really like it. I just took the little hello sentiment and I'm stamping it onto that white front panel. Instead of using black ink, I decided to use the pine ink, which is the darkest green, and I thought it would be a nice match with the green leaf image that we're adding. Okay, so onto the front of our note card where we have our string art window. I'm adding some double-sided tape. I'm making sure that I'm sandwiching all of the ends of that floss behind the tape so that none of them come undone. I can now add the front panel to that, and there you can see how our window is actually see-through to the inside of the card, which I think is really fun. A few years ago, I did a video where I stretched tulle, a piece of tulle, across a window. That would allow you to look inside of the card, and it gives a similar effect. I'll link to that video here if you want to try it. It's super easy to do. Okay, so I added the leaf image right across our string art window, and also added a few Lucy's Cards Ivory Pearls scattered here and there on the card. So there you can see the string art window showing through to the inside of the card, and also that pearl embossing powder that we used on the leaf that matches exactly with the pearls I put on the background. So this shows you can use string art to create a window on a card also. Before we go, I have one quick bonus card that I wanted to share with you because this was really fast to do and such a cool look. This card I created using the Altenew String Art Heart die. They came out with the rectangles, this heart die, and also a butterfly. Well, the heart I think is really fun because you easily can create a really cool pattern. I like to start in the bottom of the heart and then stretch up to the top center of the heart. Then I go to the left one on the top and stretch down to the right one on the bottom. So you can see I'm moving to the left and the right. And I'm going to continue to do this until I go all the way around the heart. And what you end up with is a really cool pattern. Now this time I'm only using 1 ply of the DMC floss, so it's very thin. You could use sewing thread if you wanted to for this. I think this would be really pretty with the thread that has the variation of color. So you could have like a rainbow look, or you could just change up the color here and there. But I decided to just go through and do it all with this teal color. You could use this same heart string art die and do just stripes vertically or stripes horizontally. You could create whatever you want. So after I continued to do that pattern all the way around, look at what you end up with. Super easy to do, doesn't take long at all, and it's a great focal point for a card. I think it'd be fun to do a set of note cards with different color hearts on each card and give that as a gift. Okay, to finish this off, I kept it simple. I added it to a 4 1/4 by 5.5 inch craft note card. In the center, I added a dark pink heart, and I put a little bit of shimmer pen on that so it sparkled. And then I added a sentiment strip that says, "My Sweet Friend." Super simple, but there's a lot of interest to it thanks to that string art look. All right, I hope you liked this video. It really is a fun technique to do. I hope you also try it. I have all of the different things that I used listed below if you want to check that out. In the middle are a couple other videos I think you'll like, including using tulle across a window so you can have something floating on it. Thanks for spending this time with me today. I hope you have a wonderful weekend, and we'll see you again soon.